She moved in with my husband while I was still married to him. They thought I'd fall apart. They thought I'd beg him to come home. But I didn't say a word. I let them decorate the apartment I paid for, watched them play house in my living room, let them pose in my kitchen for Instagram. And just when they felt safe, I sold it. While they were still living there, for the longest time, I thought we were fine. Not perfect, but stable. Like an old tree in a quiet forest still standing even through storms. Mark and I had been married for 8 years. We lived in Seattle, in a modest townhome I bought before we got married. I worked as an office manager at a dental clinic. He sold real estate, mostly condos in Bellevue. We were normal, or so I thought. Looking back, the signs were there. Subtle at first: missed dinners, longer showers, his phone always on silent. But I brushed it off. Told myself he was just stressed. Sales were hard. Clients were demanding. Until one Friday night, he didn't come home. No call, no text, just silence. I waited on the couch, pretending to watch TV, but my eyes were on the door the whole time. When it finally creaked open at 2:13 a.m., he walked in smelling like cologne that wasn't his. Lipstick on his collar, a shade I would never wear. I didn't ask. I didn't scream. I just said, "You're late." He looked surprised, like he expected a fight, maybe even wanted one. But I wasn't going to give him the performance he was hoping for. Instead, I said nothing. The next morning, he told me he needed space. Space. Like our whole marriage was just suffocating him. He said he was going to stay with a friend for a while. That friend turned out to be Chloe Baxter, 28, worked at a gym. The kind of girl who put self-care in her bio and posted mirror selfies with quotes like "protect your peace." I didn't know who she was at first. Not until my coworker Sarah showed me her Instagram. Chloe had posted a story. It was a boomerang, of a set of wine glasses clinking in front of a giant floor-to-ceiling window. My window. The lake view I saved 5 years for. The open kitchen I remodeled with white marble and brushed gold fixtures. My home. She was living there. Not crashing, not visiting. Living. With my husband. And they didn't even try to hide it. They replaced the throw pillows, hung up a neon sign that said "Love lives here," even repotted my fiddle leaf fig. The one I babied through winter? Mark texted me a few days later, said it was just temporary, that I should be adult enough to understand. I replied, "Okay, just one word. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to chase. I had the deed, the mortgage, the proof." So I waited, watched, planned. Because if Chloe wanted to play house in my life, she should have checked whose name was still on the door. They moved in like I was already gone. Like I had never existed. The first time I saw their photos together, I was at my desk, pretending to work while trying to swallow the acid in my throat. My coworker Sarah slid her phone toward me with that kind of slow pity that always comes with a warning. "You need to see this," she whispered. And there it was. Chloe, in my kitchen, wearing one of Mark's shirts like it was hers, holding a mug I bought on our anniversary trip to Napa, smiling like she owned the place. Behind her, I saw the backsplash I'd spent 3 weekends picking out. The same tiles I laid by hand because we couldn't afford a contractor back then. Now she was leaning against it, carefree, glowing, smug. The caption said, "Home is where the heart is." It hit me like a slap. I didn't comment, didn't like the post, just locked my phone and stood up to breathe. That weekend, they threw a party. I didn't know until a neighbor texted me, "Did you sell the condo? New folks are loud." I laughed, out loud, in the middle of a Target aisle. People stared. I didn't care. Because no, I hadn't sold it. Yet. But that text planted something, a thought, a seed. They were playing house in a place I owned, not metaphorically, not emotionally, legally. Every inch of that condo still had my name on it. Mark was never added to the deed. I bought it before we married. I paid the down payment. I signed the mortgage. I refinanced it alone after his credit tanked 2 years ago. So I went home, to my new apartment across town, tiny, temporary, and painfully beige. I opened my laptop, logged into the county records, and pulled up the deed. There it was, Alyssa Monroe, sole owner. My name, my paper, my power. So I made a plan. First, I called a real estate agent I trusted, Janelle. We weren't friends, but she was professional, discreet, and ruthless in all the right ways. I need to list a condo, I told her quietly. She didn't ask why, just asked for the address and said she'd schedule a walkthrough. Is it occupied, she asked. Yes, I said, but not by me. She paused. Do I want to know? Not right now, I said. That week, I waited until Mark and Chloe posted that they were out for a weekend hike. I knew their patterns, their timelines. I still had access to Mark's shared calendar. He'd never changed the password. So while they were gone, I met Janelle at the condo. Walking through it felt like stepping into an alternate version of my life. The couch was the same, but the cushions were different, brighter, too much yellow. They'd added floating shelves, filled them with fake plants and crystals. In the bathroom, Chloe had replaced my minimalist soap dispensers with pastel ones that read, his and hers. I stood there, staring at them, and whispered, I hope you like it here, because it wouldn't be theirs for long. Janelle took photos while I removed nothing. I wanted the place to look lived in. It added appeal. It looked like someone loved the space. That someone just wasn't them. We listed the property under a private MLS. Only pre-screened buyers, no signs, no open houses. Viewings were scheduled during Chloe's yoga classes and Mark's showings. Each time someone toured the condo, I felt a jolt of satisfaction. They had no idea strangers were walking through their safe space. One afternoon, a couple made an offer, all cash, above asking. They wanted to close in 2 weeks. Perfect. I signed the documents like I was signing a love letter to myself. Meanwhile, Chloe posted a video tour of the condo, giggling in the hallway and showing off my dream closet. I watched that video 4 times. Not because I was angry, but because I was savoring. There's something intoxicating about watching someone decorate a house they're about to be kicked out of. She had no idea. Mark didn't suspect a thing either. He texted me once, if you need anything from the condo, just ask. I didn't reply, because soon neither of them would have access to it. 3 days before closing, I sent them a formal notice, via certified mail, delivered right to the door. It read, this property has been sold. You have 72 hours to vacate. Failure to comply will result in legal action. I imagined Chloe reading that, her jaw dropping, her eyes scanning it 3 times, trying to understand. I imagined Mark realizing he never owned a thing, that this wasn't their home. It was mine, and I was taking it back. The silence that followed was delicious. Then came the panic. Mark called me 13 times in one night, left 5 voicemails. The first was confused, the second, angry. The third was begging. By the 6th call, he just said, please call me back. Please. I watched their social media disappear. One post at a time, their fairy tale crumbling in real time. On the day they were forced to leave, I drove by. Not to gloat, not exactly. I just wanted to see it, to witness the truth settle in. Chloe stood on the curb, holding a suitcase, screaming into her phone. Mark paced beside her, red-faced, sweating. I parked down the block and watched them from a distance. And for the first time in months, I felt whole. Not because I hurt them, but because I reclaimed myself. They moved in like I was already gone, but I never left. I was just waiting. Revenge requires silence.
I didn't scream, didn't throw a fit, didn't show up at the door with a suitcase of rage.
I just moved pieces quietly, one at a time. Like chess, while they toasted wine in my living room, I was meeting with escrow agents. While she filmed Get Ready With Me videos in my bedroom mirror, I was reviewing buyer contracts. And while he posted grateful captions, I was scheduling a final walkthrough with the couple who would soon take everything from them. The night before closing, I couldn't sleep. Not out of guilt, out of anticipation. The way a runner feels before the race, the way a violinist grips the bow before the concert, every piece of this moment had been orchestrated. And now it was time. The buyers arrived first. A couple in their 40s, well-dressed, direct, professional. They loved the unit, loved the location, the lighting, the renovations. Of course they did. I had good taste. They signed the final documents with calm confidence, like they'd just bought a luxury handbag instead of a home with ghosts. Then came the paperwork. Transfer of ownership. New deed. Final notarized signatures. I watched as my name, Alyssa Monroe, moved quietly into the background. Replaced by new names, new people, new beginnings. But I wasn't sad, because the home had already been tainted. It wasn't mine anymore, not emotionally. I had already let it go. Now it was time for them to let it go too. The clock ticked. The 72-hour notice expired at midnight. At 12:03 a.m., I received a text from Mark. "We're not leaving." Simple, defiant. He must have thought he still had power, that he could delay the inevitable. But he forgot something critical. Possession isn't power. Ownership is. I sent the text to my attorney. And then I sent one final email to the buyers, confirming that the occupants would be removed legally, if needed. They responded, understood. The next morning, I woke early. No makeup, no fancy outfit, just jeans, sneakers, and a calm that felt almost holy. I stopped by a bakery, picked up coffee and a croissant. Not for them. For me, because today wasn't about destruction. It was about justice. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the sheriff arrived at the condo. I didn't need to be there, but I wanted to be. I stood across the street, coffee in hand, and watched. A uniformed officer knocked. Mark opened the door. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I could see the shift in his face. From arrogance to confusion, from confusion to panic, he turned back inside. Moments later, Chloe appeared behind him. No longer glowing, no longer smug. She looked small, rattled, like a woman waking from a dream that turned into a nightmare. The sheriff handed them documents. They read, they argued, they pleaded. But nothing changed the law. This wasn't personal, it was property. They had 15 minutes to gather essentials. 15 minutes. They tried to buy time, delay, claim misunderstanding. But it was all documented. Their belongings would be packed and delivered later, at the expense of the new owners, because the old owner, she was done. I watched as Mark carried a duffel bag down the stairs. He didn't see me, but I saw everything. Saw the way his shoulders slumped. Saw the way Chloe refused to meet the officer's eyes. Saw the way they sat on the curb, clutching their things like children left behind after a field trip, and I didn't smile. Not because I wasn't satisfied, but because the moment didn't require a smile. It was bigger than that. It was sacred. I walked back to my car, drove away, didn't post about it, didn't text anyone, didn't announce it to the world, because real revenge, it doesn't need an audience. It just needs results. Later that week, I received a gift basket from the buyers. It was filled with wine, chocolates, a handwritten note. "Thank you for the smoothest transaction we've ever had." I laughed. They had no idea, or maybe they did. Maybe they recognized what I had done not just legally, but emotionally. Because this wasn't about a condo. It was about dignity. About not letting people walk into your life, wreck the foundation, and call it remodeling. Chloe eventually blocked me on social media. Mark didn't. He lurked. I saw his views on my stories, the ones I rarely posted. Just glimpses of a new apartment. A fresh paint color? A framed photo of me alone, smiling, whole. He never reached out again. Not really. Except once. 6 months later, a single message. "I miss the way you made things feel like home." I didn't reply. He had made his choice. And I had made mine. To reclaim everything? My space, my peace, my power. So no, I didn't slam doors, didn't break dishes. I sold the floor beneath their feet. And walked away, signed, sealed, evicted. After they left, the apartment felt different. Not for them, for me. It wasn't the place anymore. It was the silence that came after. The kind of silence that doesn't ache. The kind that confirms something is over. The buyers moved in that same weekend, efficient, grateful, unaware that the space they now called home had been a stage for betrayal and justice. I drove past one last time, just to see. The blinds were open, the lights warm, a couple sitting at the kitchen island, laughing over takeout, and that was that. No drama, no residue, just closure. But outside of that space, the ripple had only just begun. 3 days after the eviction, my phone rang. Blocked number? I didn't answer. A voicemail came through. Chloe. Her voice cracked as she tried to sound composed. "I don't know what kind of woman does this," she said. "But congratulations. You won. Are you proud?" I deleted the message. Not because it didn't sting, but because I didn't want her words to live in my phone any longer than they had to. What kind of woman does this? A woman who got tired of being quiet in the face of disrespect? A woman who chose strategy over screaming? A woman who owned the land they danced on and decided to take it back? Mark tried next. Not through calls, not through texts, through mutuals. Friends I hadn't heard from in months suddenly popped up with check-ins. "Hey, just wondering how you're doing. Mark mentioned you've been through a lot." I smiled every time. He was looking for sympathy, trying to control the narrative. But I didn't respond to them either. I didn't need to explain myself. The truth didn't require a press release. Eventually, the silence got loud. Chloe posted a cryptic story, "Some people only learn power through pain," followed by a photo of a cardboard box labeled "New Beginnings." But you could see the bitterness in the edges of the photo. It wasn't a new beginning. It was a forced exit. She unfollowed me after that. And Mark, he moved into a basement sublet in Tacoma. A friend of a friend told me. I didn't ask for the update, but when it came, I didn't stop it either. I just nodded and said, "Sounds about right." Weeks passed, then a month, then two. The energy shifted. Not just in my home, but in me. I'd started sleeping through the night. Started cooking for one without sadness. Started walking around barefoot again, something I'd stopped doing long before I even realized I'd stopped. I painted a wall deep green. I bought myself flowers every Friday. I signed up for pottery classes. And in those small, seemingly insignificant choices, I began building a life that had nothing to do with revenge. Only power, only peace. And then, one morning, I opened my email. Subject line, "Rain request for interview. Modern revenge stories of reclaiming power." A journalist. Apparently, someone had heard what I'd done. Through someone else who knew someone. They wanted to include my story in a piece about women reclaiming property, power, and peace through legal action instead of confrontation. I almost said no. Almost. But then I thought, why not? Why not let the truth be seen for what it was? So I agreed. Under one condition, anonymity. The story ran a month later. I was a M from Washington. The article went semi-viral. Not viral like gossip, viral like truth. People wrote in, other women, strangers. They said thank you. They said I needed this. One message stayed with me. "Your silence was louder than any scream I've ever heard." That one made me cry. Not because I was sad, but because someone finally understood. It wasn't just about selling a place. It was about taking the narrative back, about showing that power doesn't always need to roar. Sometimes it just needs to sign a contract. I never heard from Mark again. Not really. He tried once in email, vague, nostalgic. Subject line, "Hope you're okay." Inside a single sentence, "I miss how steady you were." I didn't reply. 'Cause I'm still steady, just not for him. The new buyers invited me to a holiday party. They didn't know the whole story, just that I was the previous owner and made the transition seamless. I thanked them and declined. I didn't need to walk through those doors again. I'd already walked out on my own terms. Closure doesn't always come in big moments. Sometimes it's in the quiet. In the mornings when the light hits your new windows just right. In the afternoons when your laugh surprises even you. In the nights when you finally sleep like you deserve to. So no, there was no final confrontation. No apology that changed everything. There was only truth and choice. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing I left, not because I had to, but because I could, because I had the paperwork. The will, the strength, and they had the audacity to forget who they were dealing with. But I reminded them, not with fire, but with a pen, not with shouting, but with silence, and not with hate, but with absolute, unapologetic closure. They took my husband, I took their home. That should have been the end of it. A final act, a closed chapter, but the truth is, the story didn't end there. Because revenge, when done right, doesn't just restore balance. It reshapes you. It burns everything false to the ground and leaves only what's real standing. And what was real after everything was me. I didn't just sell a property. I reclaimed a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. The woman before the betrayal, before the exhaustion, before the shrinking, she was still there, quiet, patient, powerful. I poured all the proceeds from the sale into something new. Not a new apartment, not shoes or spa days or empty indulgence. I bought a commercial space downtown. Small, exposed brick, light-drenched. It used to be a law office. I turned it into a women's co-working hub. A place where women could write, launch, meet, rebuild. Where they didn't have to whisper about bad men or broken homes. Where they could speak loudly or silently and still be heard. I called it Second Key. Because sometimes the first one doesn't open the right door. And that's okay. Opening day was surreal. Dozens of women walked in, some entrepreneurs, some artists, some just recovering. From divorces, from losses, from being told to stay quiet and be nice. We welcomed them all. And I watched from the corner as life moved forward around me, through me, because of me. Mark found out. Of course he did. The article about Second Key made the local paper. It wasn't about him, but he must have felt it. 'Cause he emailed again? Congratulations, he wrote, "You always did have vision. I'm sorry I didn't see it." I didn't respond. Forgiveness is not the same as access. And closure is not an invitation. Still, part of me appreciated the message. Not for what it said, but for what it revealed. He was still behind me, still watching, still understanding too late what he had thrown away. Chloe vanished completely. No more social media, no more updates. Rumor had it she moved back to Boise, that she told people Seattle was too toxic. I never corrected her. Let her build whatever story she needed. We all have our versions, but mine was rooted in truth, in quiet action, in unshakable ownership. One evening, I stayed late at Second Key. A young woman sat at the window with tears on her cheeks and a laptop in front of her. She looked up as I passed. "Do you run this place?" she asked. "I do," I said. She smiled, wiped her face. "I just filed for divorce," she said. I didn't know where else to go. "You're in the right place," I told her. And I meant it. Because if my pain could be a map for someone else's escape, then none of it was wasted. None of it. I didn't need a fairy tale. I didn't need a new man, or revenge sex, or a glow-up. What I needed was my voice back. And I found it in the fine print, in the locked door, in the silence after the eviction, and most of all, in the space I carved out of the ashes. Not for revenge, but for resurrection. One night, alone in my new apartment, I poured a glass of wine and opened my journal. I wrote only one sentence. "I am the storm they didn't see coming." And I smiled, 'cause they never do. They underestimate the quiet ones, the patient ones, the ones who wait, but they forget. Waiting isn't weakness. It's preparation. And when the time comes, we don't shout, we don't swing, we sign, we close, we rise. So yes, she moved in with my husband, but I moved on, and I took everything worth keeping with me,